we turn to a story that underscores the growing tension between national sovereignty and the movement for democratic freedoms in Asia. China's foreign ministry has sharply condemned prominent Hong Kong democracy activist Nathan Law, describing him as an anti-China, destabilising force after Singapore refused him entry over the weekend. The incident has sparked a new round of debate over how governments in the region balance security policies with fundamental freedoms, and how Beijing projects its influence far beyond its borders. In Beijing, all eyes were on the regular Foreign Ministry press briefing. Spokesman Guo Jiakun entered the briefing room with the weight of an international controversy pressing on his podium. Facing the assembled reporters, Guo said he was not personally familiar with all the details of the case, yet he made Beijing's position unmistakably clear. He stated, "Every country has the right to independently manage their entry-exit process. The person you mentioned is an anti-China, destabilising force in Hong Kong who is lawfully wanted by the Hong Kong police." With that single declaration, the Chinese government signalled its view of Nathan Law not as a political exile or refugee, but as a fugitive. The remarks followed reports that Singapore's immigration authorities turned Law away when he attempted to enter the country. The city-state has not publicly explained its decision, citing standard immigration discretion, but the move has raised questions about whether the decision was driven by independent security concerns or by a desire not to provoke Beijing. To understand the significance of this moment, it is worth recalling who Nathan Law is. Once a young legislator in Hong Kong's pro-democracy camp and a founding figure of the 2014 Umbrella Movement, Law rose to prominence as one of the most recognised advocates for greater political freedoms in the territory. Following the introduction of China's national security law for Hong Kong in 2020, legislation that dramatically reshaped the political and legal environment, Law fled to the United Kingdom, where he was granted asylum. From exile, he has continued to speak out against what he describes as the erosion of Hong Kong's autonomy and freedoms, becoming an international symbol of the city's pro-democracy cause. Singapore's decision to block Law's entry now highlights a complex web of considerations. Human rights organisations such as Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have expressed concern that governments in the region may be prioritising political relations over fundamental freedoms of movement and expression. For Singapore, a global financial hub with extensive economic ties to China, the incident illustrates the delicate balance between domestic policy, international diplomacy, and the expectations of its citizens and international partners. Regional analysts say this episode also underscores the wider pattern of Beijing extending its influence beyond its own borders. By labelling activists abroad as criminals wanted under Hong Kong's national security law, China has sought to encourage other countries to limit their movements. For Beijing, it is a matter of national security and sovereignty. For critics, it is a sign that the boundaries of political repression no longer stop at the Chinese frontier. The controversy arrives at a sensitive moment in Asia-Pacific geopolitics. Many Southeast Asian countries, including Singapore, have long pursued a pragmatic approach to China, seeking close economic and trade relations while maintaining a degree of political neutrality. Incidents like this one highlight the pressure those nations face as they try to avoid alienating Beijing while also addressing international expectations for human rights and rule of law. Public reaction has been predictably polarized. Chinese state-controlled media have echoed Guo Jiakun's description of Law, portraying him as a criminal who fled justice and warning that foreign support for such figures undermines stability in Hong Kong. International outlets, by contrast, have tended to frame the story as part of a shrinking space for political dissent, and a worrying sign of Beijing's ability to influence decisions far from its own territory. On social media, the conversation has been equally divided, with some commenters applauding Singapore's move as an assertion of sovereign authority and others condemning it as capitulation to external pressure. The case also reflects a longer history of tension between Beijing and Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. The 2019 mass protests in Hong Kong, triggered by a controversial extradition bill, set the stage for years of crackdowns. The subsequent national security law criminalized acts seen by Beijing as secession, subversion, or collusion with foreign forces. Scores of activists, journalists, and opposition politicians were arrested, others fled overseas. Beijing's description of them as destabilising forces has become a central theme of its narrative, a framing that justifies, in the government's view, efforts to seek their return. Beyond the political and legal dimensions, there are practical implications for regional diplomacy and even for business. Singapore's choice highlights the difficult reality for smaller nations that must navigate relations with major powers while maintaining their own reputations as open, globalised hubs. Business leaders have noted that while day-to-day economic activity is unlikely to be affected, repeated incidents of this nature can create an undercurrent of uncertainty that affects investor confidence and perceptions of political neutrality. Human rights experts argue that cases like Nathan Law's raise important questions about the international refugee and asylum system. They warn that when countries deny entry to activists without transparent justification, it risks undermining global norms that protect individuals fleeing political persecution. Law's experience may also deter other exiled activists from engaging in international advocacy or participating in conferences and dialogues, for fear that their travel could be restricted or that they could be detained. For Nathan Law himself, the denial of entry is another chapter in an ongoing struggle that began when he left Hong Kong 5 years ago. Although he now lives abroad, his activism continues to attract the attention of Chinese authorities. Restrictions on his ability to travel underscore the extent to which political disputes in one city can reverberate across borders, shaping the lives of individuals and influencing international diplomacy. Looking forward, analysts say that similar incidents are likely to recur. As China's global reach expands, governments around the world may find themselves pressured to take positions, either in support of Beijing's efforts to pursue those it accuses of subversion or in defense of the activists' right to free movement. Each decision will carry diplomatic costs and signal to the international community where a country stands on the tension between sovereignty and human rights. The episode also shines a spotlight on the evolving role of Southeast Asia in regional security and political debates. Traditionally, countries like Singapore have been seen as neutral ground, open to global engagement and dialogue. But as rivalries between great powers sharpen and domestic security considerations grow, that neutral space may become increasingly difficult to maintain. Observers note that this incident may influence how future international conferences, human rights forums, or even academic exchanges handle participants who are viewed as politically sensitive. The rules for entry and participation may become more restrictive, reflecting the broader struggle over how ideas and political voices cross borders in an era of heightened geopolitical competition. Ultimately, this story is not merely about one man being turned away at an airport. It is about the reach of national security policies, the limits of political dissent, and the choices that governments make when these forces collide. It is also a reminder that the long-running contest over Hong Kong's political future continues to have consequences well beyond the city itself, shaping relations between nations and testing the balance between sovereignty and universal human rights. In conclusion, China's denunciation of Nathan Law as a destabilising force, Singapore's decision to bar his entry, and the wider international response reveal a shifting geopolitical landscape in which the struggles of individuals are entwined with the strategies of states. The debate over these issues is far from resolved, and as Guo Jiakun's briefing made clear, Beijing has no intention of changing its position on Nathan Law or others like him. For regional governments and the international community, the challenge will be to navigate this terrain without sacrificing their own principles or their security. This has been a report on a story that continues to evolve, a story that highlights the enduring tension between the imperatives of state sovereignty and the universal quest for freedom and justice.